That's it.
I'm here for all of it.
I'm here for it. I like
I'm
it.
so here for it. He's got that infectious smile, and I love anybody that wants to have a good time. So
Remember when he
welcome,
discovered
everybody.
dipping Oreos into milk earlier this year?
Yeah.
It was a real
I
thing.
mean, it's charming.
Yeah, he's just got this childlike charisma about him. Wendy, Jay Will, good to see you guys. Stephen A. is off. A lot of voices joining us. Mel Kiper Jr. will be here. Dominique Foxworth, Rob Ninkovich, Mike Tannenbaum, all stopping by. We're going to have a lot of fun, but we are starting in the association, gentlemen. Are we ready? And I'm glad to have you both in studio.
Thank you.
So let's go. The Lakers without LeBron James, who's hampered with an ankle injury, and Anthony Davis, who likely will return this weekend. It was all Brody as LA traveled to Dallas to face Luka in the Mavs and took an 18-point loss. This was the Lakers' third straight loss, and they fell out of play-in contention. Tensions boiled. Russell Westbrook getting into this exchange with Brad Turner, veteran Lakers beat for the LA Times.
Now you got
Lay out of their plane. It's the first time since October that the Lakers are out of playoff contention. Let me just say this. I've never met Brad Turner. I don't know if either of you have, but I feel like he handled that absolutely
Well, let me tell you two things about Brad
perfectly.
Turner real quick. One, when I first started going to Laker games 20 years ago, Denzel Washington, off season, Brad Turner lives in Paris. That's all you need to know.
Sounds like Mike after the loss, Jay.
So here's how I want to portray the picture of Russell Westbrook, because I've been on this show multiple times, and I said one of the things that happens in LA, when you lose to this degree, they find alternative storylines to start pushing. And I said that the Russell Westbrook media reality show was going to begin. And that's what it's been happening, right? Each and every day, you've been seeing Russell Westbrook at post pressers, and I'm not condoning his action. He's getting frustrated, but it leads to all this type of stuff. It's like a shiny object that distracts you away from the problems that are actually existing on the court. Now, I recognize that a lot of that is self-inflicted, right? I wish that Russell had more awareness where he answered the question properly the first time. There was no need to bark back at him and say, what do you think? And then suck your teeth and go on for that. But that's Russell, right? But I feel like I know who Russell Westbrook is. Russell Westbrook has told me this is who he is his entire career. And it just feels like it distracts us away from the fact that this roster is poorly constructed. Now, I know LeBron James and Russell Westbrook have a lot of dealing with that. It distracts me from the fact that, hey, they don't have shooters. Russell Westbrook is a poor man's version of LeBron James, and I know that's poor man usually knocks somebody, but we're talking about one of the greatest players to ever play the game. You have to surround them with personnel that actually is compatible to how these guys both play. So I hate that this happens because this makes everybody focus on this, and I refuse to let this be Russell Westbrook's legacy. The guy averaged a triple-double for 3 consecutive seasons. He will go down as a Hall of Famer. And this, to me, as a former athlete, proves it's hard to win championships, man. It's hard for everything to come together and click at the right time with the right pieces and the right coach to get these things done. So I refuse to be on this guy on the side that just comes out and annihilates Russell Westbrook today, because I think it's gotten to the point of it's overboard now.
I actually was happy Russell admitted that he doesn't have the answer. Because, and I actually think for the last month, Westbrook's played his best basketball of the year for the Lakers. The last 15 games, Molly, he's averaging more points, his shooting is up, his turnovers are down. It's still not what the Lakers wanted, but it's better. He's actually played better. And so I feel like this last month, Russ has actually kind of more come to terms with his situation. It's not going to help the Lakers this season. It's not going to help them last night. I mean, it's already over. But one of the things that was frustrating me about Russell, and one of the reasons why I don't think he was a sympathetic figure for a lot of this year, is because he was so hard-headed about everything. He's out there still playing the same way he was playing when everything was failing. So the fact, I mean, if you look at his numbers from November and December, I mean, he was averaging 5 turnovers a game. You look at the way he's played the last month, it's like, it's livable. And so I actually think if Russ had acted and handled his business this way back in October, November, we might be having a different conversation right now.
2 questions for both of you. How do you see him as a sympathetic figure now?
And that's the thing, like, he was really upset.
Especially after that exchange.
It's mostly more from where he was, Molly, because, you know, the Westbrook thing.
Yeah.
He was frustrated because even though he was having this miserable season, the fans were all over him. And the reason the fans were all over him is because he wanted to be in LA, and they came and he wouldn't stop shooting. He refused to stop shooting. He refused to stop trying to bank in those shots from 18 feet. And he got to the point where the only way he could really get sympathy is to mention his wife and son, because they are sympathetic figures. But he just wasn't a sympathetic figure this year because of the way he handled his business, the way he was defiant. And that's not a surprise. That's how he's been his whole career. But I actually kind of saw him as being a little bit vulnerable, at least by the Russ standard last night.
I don't feel sorry for Russ, because when you use the word refuse, that is still who Russell Westbrook is to me. And I sometimes feel like it's my job on this platform to try to give people insight into some of these special traits of Russell Westbrook that sometimes I feel like we forget, because this is part of a car accident that we like to pour more gasoline on, because when we see fire, more gasoline, more gasoline. Once again, some of this is self-inflicted by Russ himself with the way he handles media. I am not making excuses for that. But that same relentless refusal to quit, refusal to stop shooting. You know how many people in life refuse to do things because they're told they can't do it? Or it's a little bit too hard. I'm not gonna be who I am. Or I'm not gonna continue to fight for it. At least I love that about him. At least he wears his emotions on his sleeve. Like, we used to have things against athletes before where, well, I wish athletes would just tell us how they feel.
He's talking about it becoming a sympathetic figure. Because you're basically showing
saying
sympathy
he's being
for it.
authentic, and he is who he is, and he's staying consistent regardless of the media reaction. But let me ask you this, because you brought up his legacy, and what I'm curious of, what was his legacy prior to coming to the Lakers, and what do you think it's becoming now? Because you said, I'm not buying into this legacy. What is that?
Well, I'm not buying into how people are trying to create a legacy that he's a loser. Like, that's the direction it feels like it's going. Russell was 101. I mean, the guy averaged a triple-double for 3 consecutive seasons. And just look at the numbers. At the end of the day, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. Does that equate into winning a championship? Did it equate into winning a championship for Charles Barkley? Do I think less of Charles Barkley because he didn't win a championship? I know the common everyday person will say, well, you never won anything, but Charles Barkley is still a Hall of Famer. And I think that we sometimes lose sight of how special of a player Russell is. Does it come with some of his flaws? Sure it does, but it still doesn't take away from his...
Move it forward and go on the court. What is the likelihood that the Lakers now miss the play-in?
It's getting very likely, actually, because I don't think LeBron is going to play tomorrow in Utah. AD likely not play tomorrow in Utah. Maybe they come back this weekend. Utah just had a miserable loss to the Clippers last night. I expect Utah to try to easily win this game. So that means that they're probably going to be even now 2, because they're tied, but they're really a game back because they're a tiebreaker. That means they're probably going to be 2 back. And San Antonio, the next 2 games, they play Memphis tonight, but the 2 games over the weekend, they play the Blazers at home. They beat the Blazers in Portland by 30 last week. I mean, the Blazers are not a good team, or the Spurs are not a good team either. Otherwise, they wouldn't have the same record as the Lakers. But by the end of the weekend, by the time AD comes back, maybe on Sunday, Lakers could be down 3, Molly, with the hardest schedule left. And now, I respect AD and LeBron, and like maybe they put the hammer down and maybe they but like at this point, even saying they finished 500 would be, I mean, like 500 in their remaining games. Like right now, they're trying to avoid a 50-loss season. 50 losses. I mean, it's insane that they're even in position to be in the play-in. They should be thanking the breaks that they're lucky to be in the play-in. I mean, there hasn't even been a team in the Western Conference make the playoffs with an under 500 record since 1997. Normally, they would have been on vacation in Cancun for a month already.
I would have bet you a vacation in Cancun that we were going to see the Lakers and the Nets in this year's finals. Very wrong on that.
Look, I said a month ago that I didn't think they were going to make the play-in tournament. And it seems like there was this false reality of people living in this space that are saying, whoa, when they get it all together. I'm like, if you watch this team play consistently, there is nothing in my basketball mind that makes me think they're going to actually figure it out and they're all going to come together. You're telling me now after AD missing 4 months of playing, he's going to come back and be the savior? You're telling me now LeBron James with a sore left knee and a twisted left ankle that he's going to come back and drop 50 plus? You're telling me all of a sudden Russ is going to figure it out? You're telling me all of a sudden Frank Vogel defensively, this team is average. They went from being one of the top defensive teams a year ago to being average. They're going to figure it out scheme-wise? No, they're not. The best thing to do, I'm telling you, And I know people are going to say, well, LeBron, you made this mess. You got to fight for it. Business decision, Wendy. I almost called you Greeny. Praise
That's
the
okay.
Lord.
We saw
Wendy,
you on Get
I
Up.
just saw Greeny.
It's
We were
all
just
good.
with Greeny 5 minutes ago. Shut it down. Like, I start thinking about what's in my best interest going into year 20 of my NBA career, going into year 38. I know he's not going to shut it down, but I don't want to increase the probability of LeBron James getting hurt. I don't want to see what happened to another great Laker player in Kobe Bryant who was trying to play off an injury and then injured himself more. Not when you're fighting for a 10 spot.
Yeah, I was just going to say, but when you have AD potentially coming back, and if you get,
there's
let me
the hope.
just say,
Hope.
LeBron back healthy, you get it all together, and you never know injuries. I'm not wishing injury ever on anyone, but you're not saying that they could get a series when we're talking about that big three. You never know. That's why I feel like
is LeBron going to come back healthy? Is he going to come back healthy? You're telling me
when has he ever really been healthy in the playoffs?
Well, that's
right?
my thing. Now he has a
year.
rolled ankle. Is AD going to come back healthy? You're telling me AD is going to come back healthy?
I mean, if you want to get LeBron into a bad mood as fast as possible, bring up minutes. He just doesn't want to hear it. He's like, you don't know what minutes do to my body. I know what minutes do to my body. I gave up talking about minutes to LeBron 5 years ago because he gave us all a lecture about how we don't know. But I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that he doesn't listen to that. That doesn't mean anything to him. I mean, just last week, he played the back-to-back in Washington and Cleveland. And Frank Vogel was saying, this is a guy should be the example for the rest of the league because he always plays. He always plays. And the thing was, 3 years ago, his first year in LA, he did shut it down the stretch. He had that groin injury. But the difference was they had their draft pick. Ended up being really smart. They tanked at the end. They ended got really lucky. They ended up getting the 4th pick, and it was the key moment that got them to the title the next year because they traded it as a central piece for Anthony Davis. They don't have their pick. So, like, if you're looking at LeBron and AD for competitive people, I think Molly, I think you're right. Yeah. I think what Molly is saying is going to win the day.
And I'll just
I believe that for sure.
I'll just wrap by saying this really quick. Yesterday, I brought up the LeBron thing, and I said self-serving, maybe not the best choice of words in terms of he just passed Karl Malone, keep playing, wanting the minutes, et cetera. And JJ Redick kind of said you can't have it both ways. You can't call out guys for load management and then be mad at LeBron for wanting to play. And that was a really good point. I had no response on that because it's true, and we do that, and we can't have it both ways. We're going to keep it going here, guys. Giannis with the block for the win. The Bucks beating the Sixers in Philly, 118-116. Antetokounmpo getting the better of Joel Embiid. His competition not just in the East, but for MVP. On Tuesday, Jokic overtook Embiid as the odds-on favorite for MVP. There was no change in odds for Giannis, but the two-time MVP remains in the race for third. I'll start with you, Wendy. Who's your MVP frontrunner?
I voted for Joel Embiid in our straw poll, and the reason those odds changed is because of our straw poll. Tim Bontemps does this poll. It's one of the coolest things we do. He talks to the actual voters, not here in New York, not in Los Angeles, in all 30 markets overseas, which is the pool that the actual voters come from. The voters believe, and you can disagree with them, you can present your own case, but as of today, the voters believe that Nikola Jokic is the MVP. And the first place votes were 62-29.
Ooh.
The last time we did this poll, the last time Tim did this poll, which was about maybe 6 weeks ago, Embiid was ahead. So this last month of Jokic, where he's averaged 30 points on 61% shooting and then carried the Nuggets to a bunch of wins, has apparently impressed the voters. It didn't change my vote. And this always happens. If you vote for Embiid, people say, oh, you don't like Jokic. I mean, I voted for Jokic for MVP last year. I just can't find a reason to demote Embiid the way he's playing. He had another brilliant game last night. He had a brilliant game Sunday in Phoenix against one of the best defenses in the league. But I'm telling you, I can sit here and defend Embiid. You can give me your case for Giannis. Giannis is in distant third.
Understood.
The voters are not, and the vote isn't due today. The vote's due in 2 weeks. It's not a guarantee. But Vegas knows how important that straw poll is. If you didn't have your vote, if you didn't have your bet in on Jokic before that straw poll came out, you got bad price today.
Wendy, I don't have Giannis winning my MVP. I have Jokic winning my MVP. And I thought that this year has been really interesting. I actually got in an argument with Stephen A about this because I feel like he is the most underappreciated superstar we have in the NBA. It feels like people always try to knock him because it doesn't look sexy, right? Or it doesn't have the same pizzazz that Joel Embiid have. This guy has 19 triple-doubles for the season. That's more than 19 NBA teams, Molly, combined. Let me say that again. That's more than 19 NBA teams combined. You said averaging 30 points on 61% shooting on this stretch, right? Leads the league in PER. And let me give you an analogy that puts it in perspective for everybody. So we're talking about AD not being available. We're talking about Russ being a shell of himself. LeBron having to average 50 or to a degree to keep his team in contention to be in the play-in tournament. This guy's been playing without Jamal Murray. He's been playing without Michael Porter Jr. the whole season. And I'll tell you, they're in 6th right now in the West. They could end up in 4th or 5th in the West. So you talk about overachieving. You talk about the job that Michael Malone is doing. I don't hear a lot of people talk about his name being in conversation for Coach of the Year. Like, it just feels like everything about Denver doesn't get the respect nationally that is truly
I will
deserved.
say this, though. He is the MVP. He won the MVP, and he's leading the kid. I mean, can you be underrated if you're about to win your 2nd-straight MVP?
But I mean, you've been talking about Jokic, but I feel like on national platform shows, he's not the most highly touted topic.
We're always talking about New York, LA, all of it. But I want to know this: can Giannis catch him?
Well, see, here's my thing. I don't know if Giannis can catch Jokic, but I think Giannis can make a major case down the stretch. The only reason I say that, Wendy, is because you think about their next several games. He's a huge game tomorrow night. Platform matters. Your stage matters. So, hey, Kevin Durant and company, that's a big-time matchup that the national media pays attention to. You're coming to Brooklyn, colossal matchup. How do you perform in that game? You're playing against Boston, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. How do you perform in that game? You're playing against Dallas, Luka Doncic. How do you perform in that game? You're playing against the Clippers, who have Paul George back right now. They're in a prime position. They're one of the best coached teams in the NBA with Ty Lue. And then you follow up, you're playing against Cleveland, who is still in a great position in the Eastern Conference. So those nationally praised games, that's a platform I think Giannis can create a lot of leverage for himself.
Final word here.
I would just say that it's not a done deal. If you really look at the numbers and you listen to what Tim says about him, because he's done this for years now. Last year, he took a poll at this same time, saw Jokic ahead where he was at, and said he can't catch him. He declared Jokic was going to win at this point last year, and he was right. He is not declaring Jokic a shoe-in now because of what you said. Giannis could make a move. Maybe they get the number 1 seed in the East. Maybe Denver doesn't go and get the 4 or 5. Maybe they go backwards into the play-in.
True as well.
So it's still not firmed up. But right now, it is Embiid or Jokic, and Jokic has the lead, and it's not really that close.
All right. 2 things for you guys. One, I'm excited to talk about the Nets, so sit tight because I'm going to get into NFL. And I don't have social media on my phone, but I'm told we have a tweet from Stephen A. I'm nervous. Okay, at Real J Williams in Windhorse, yes, I'm on vacation.
No, you're not.
I just want everyone to know it's always an undisclosed tropical vacation. I've been working for him for 6 years. I don't even know where the man goes. But I'm watching you on First Take, especially you, Jay. You know what comes with sitting in the seat.
You're right, Stephen A. You're right. I'm in your seat today.
By the way, to my brother Brad Turner, way to handle your business. I'm with him on that. Brad Turner, Pros Pro. And he complimented my outfit. That was nice. I appreciate that. This is
Stephen.
new.
I'm with you. You're right.
This is new, Stephen A. I'm trying. Still best dressed on the show. Not best debater. All right, you guys sit tight. Stephen A., go relax. Go to the beach. Turn off your phone.
You can't relax.
Coming up here, we're talking playoffs. NFL owners have approved an overtime rule change for the postseason. The owners approving a modified proposal that will guarantee each team a possession, but only in the postseason. The rule for regular season games, which allows the team with the first possession to win if it scores a TD, will remain unchanged. Here's the commissioner from Florida.
We always listen to the fans. That's an important thing. You hear that on both sides, and I understand that. We're always looking to improve. And I think what really drove the decision was the database, ultimately, and looking at the facts and what's happened. Where we saw that most having an influence, I think it was 12 games in the postseason have been in overtime, 7 of which I believe were won on the first possession. When we see that, that's the type of thing that I think our coaches and everyone looked at. This is an issue in the postseason we should deal with.
There they are. Look at this panel. This is what I'm talking about. Suited and booted. Dominique Foxworth, Mike Tannenbaum, Rob Ninkovich. Good morning to all of you. Rob, I just wish that you had your dog with you. I really enjoy your live shots from home. I mean, usually Get Up gets all the good stuff, but I love all of it. I'm going to start with you here, Mike T. Are you a fan of the NFL OT rule change?
Well, I think it's improved, Molly, but there's still a fundamental flaw to me, which is I think there's a great disservice for the team that goes first. So let's say Team A gets the ball and it's 4th and 8 at their own 25. They're going to punt the ball, obviously. However, if they score a touchdown when team number 2 gets the ball and it's the same 4th and 8 from their own 25, they're going to go for it, obviously, to keep the game alive. So we're always talking about fairness and making an equal playing field. The way the rule is currently constructed, there'll now be a premium to go second, and it's going to give the team that goes second a big advantage, and in fact, maybe a whole extra down than the first team that has it.
So I feel like, Mike, you've made my point. I expected to actually have to debate, but like the point is, it's not going to be perfect. They've changed the rule to try to satiate people like you who are complaining about 12 games in 12 seasons. Like, it's not a big sample size. It's not impacting who the champion is on most occasions. And frankly, like, we're reacting to quite possibly the best game in football history that we had last year. And it's not recency bias anymore. It's no longer hyperbole. We're far enough away to look at that Bills-Chiefs game and understand it was incredible. And how in the offseason from that, we come back and say, hey, that wasn't good enough. Let's fix it. And then they try to fix it, and you come up with another problem with the fix. Like, we have to accept that overtime is not going to be perfect. It's going to be some version of football, which is fine. If you want it to be completely fair, then go to the college rule. Or go to a field goal kickoff, which my man Spencer Hall has been advocating for. Like, if you want it to be completely even, then have shootouts like you do in soccer. Let's just accept that it's not going to be fair. Stick with the old rules. Play some defense. If you can't stop them, maybe you need to get a weighted coin so you can win the coin toss. Like, the idea that we're going to chase some perfect overtime rule, it's not going to happen because, as Mike just demonstrated, no matter what you do, there's going to be a problem with it. And Rob agrees with me. I can see it in your face, right?
Well, listen, I like the fact that they changed the rule. I like that they kept the regular season games the way that they are, but they changed the rule in the playoffs, obviously because of last year in the Buffalo Bills, and they should have had another opportunity, yada, 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 yada. But at the end of the day, it comes down to money, too. It comes down to making sure that all these owners are happy. I guarantee because of that game, there's some owner like, we should have had another chance because if we would have made it to the Super Bowl, guess what? I'm richer. So at the end of the day, they want to make sure the fans are happy. They want to make sure the owners are happy. So let's try and adjust these rules to where everyone has a fair opportunity to score points. But at the end of the day, like Mike T said, the defense is always going to be trying to play with one hand tied behind their back. They took away that you can't touch within 5 yards. They increased the defensive holdings, the PIs. You know, a running back can run over a defender, but you can't put your head in it. I get it. But at the end of the day, it's all about the offense, about scoring points and keeping those seats happy.
Let me ask you guys
there
this.
is something very fundamental here, guys.
Go ahead, Mike T. You finish, and then I'll follow up.
Yeah, Molly, I was just going to put a ribbon on it. There is something very fundamental here, which was going back to that epic game that Dominique alluded to, which is if Buffalo had defended for 13 seconds, none of this would have happened. I mean, that is the context of what we're talking about. It was 13 seconds, and Patrick Mahomes still scored.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing I was just going to say, guys, and I was watching, I think it was on, NFL Live and then on Get Up. Marcus Spears was livid about this. And he was livid about it from the front that it diminishes the value of defense, the importance of defense once again. And I wanted to get your take on that, Rob.
Well, I still think the other team's defense, so say you're the first team that possesses the ball, you go down and you score. Well, then now it's up to us as the defense. All right, we scored offensively because my last game I played in against the Falcons, our offense got the ball. We won the toss. We got the ball. We drove it down. We scored. We won the game. Okay, yay. I was standing there really happy. But now we would have had to look at each other like, yo, we got to go and do this. We got to make a stop. And what Mike T was saying, yes, the rules are going to be different for that second team possessing the ball because first down, you're going to have 2 first downs or you're going to have 2 second downs. Fourth down plays like third down. So the team that possesses the ball second almost has the advantage. So if you win the toss in the playoffs, you might say, okay, give them the football, see what they do with it. If we score, we win. So again, this is kind of changing philosophies, changing how you would play the game. It's going to be interesting to see how people move forward with this.
It seems like the second team is going to have an advantage. Like, no one's going to have an advantage. But I think I would respond to anyone who's saying that we need to change the overtime rule the same way I respond to my children when they talk about fairness. It's not fair is what they say. Well, life's not fair. Like, it's we're not ever going to make this a completely fair thing. And like I mentioned before, if you wanted to be completely fair, then make it a kickoff or the college rules. Like those, that seems fair to me. It may be a perversion of what football actually is, but it's actually closer to fairness. It's always going to be a different circumstance for the team that goes afterwards. And this, to me, reminds me of the offensive pass interference. Remember that Saints-Rams playoff game when we had an overreaction to admittedly terrible call. Then we instituted this review of offensive pass interference, and there was a scourge on the following season. Then they retracted it. And that was actually a reaction to a bad playoff result. This is a reaction to a good playoff result. So I always appreciate that the NFL is one of the leagues that is willing to change and is kind of quick to test out new things. But this time, we had the greatest game we've ever seen. We all had a cigarette after we watched that game together as a country. It was fun. It was outstanding.
I don't even get that reference of the cigarette.
It's because it's like a. Never mind. You're not getting me fired today, Molly. Somebody will tell you.
I don't get it. I've heard cigar. It's over my head, so I'm just letting you know on that one.
Someone will tell you during the commercial break. But the point is, why would we have to change something when we had such a great experience? We loved it, and our response is, it wasn't good enough? Like, I feel like the reaction is ridiculous. Let's just go back to the old playoff or the old overtime rules. Or, I mean, in the postseason, we can't have ties, but it's not crazy to have regular season ties. More football is not always a good thing, I think, is the fundamental basis for my argument. It's not always better to have more.
Let me ask you this, Mike. If both teams score a touchdown, could you see the next possession going for 2 as a strategy here with the rule change?
Yeah, that's interesting, Molly. That was sort of what Mike Vrabel's suggestion was, which was going back to the initial rule, which is if you score and then got a 2-point play, the game was over. So it's a little bit of what Dominique's alluded to with the college game, which is, I think it's now in the third overtime, you have to go for 2. So I think that's probably coming because you're going to get into player health and safety issues too, where you want the game to end. And by forcing teams to go for 2, it does accelerate the ending.
All right, we'll leave it there. All you guys are back. Thank you for that. So appreciate it. And I'm going to Google that reference. I don't know if I should, Dominique. Privately. All right, guys.
On your work computer, though.
Thank you so much. It's my work computer. I'll talk to all you three in just a bit. Jay, according to Woj, Celtics center Robert Williams is expected to return in 4 to 6 weeks after undergoing surgery on his left knee. Williams could be back in the lineup as soon as the second round of the Eastern Conference playoffs. Good news for the C's?
Great news for them. One of the reasons why they're one of the best defensive teams in the NBA is due to Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown being to pressure on the perimeter because you have a guy as the landlord behind you and a guy like Robert Williams who can block shots but also alter so many shots throughout the course of a game.
Absolutely. We'll keep it going here, guys, to the Nets, who beat the Pistons, who are 14th in the East by just 7 last night at home, thanks to Kevin Durant dropping 41. Brooklyn could certainly use some help on defense, paging Ben Simmons. Here's Steve Nash on their Achilles heel.
It comes down to how much edge we play with. In Miami, we play with a lot of edge. Against Utah, the best offense in the league, play with a lot of edge. I think when we play with edge, we're a much better team defensively. When we take our foot off the gas a little bit, we're not good enough just to roll out there and shut people down.
JJ Redick also has some concerns about Brooklyn, saying this yesterday right here on First Take. Take a listen.
I'm going to say this. I don't see the Nets, without Ben Simmons healthy, I don't see the Nets winning a playoff series.
With a full-time Kyrie and Kevin Durant, You know this squad very well. You know this area very well. I won't put you on blast. You don't have them winning a playoff series?
Kevin Durant is an all-world player. Kyrie Irving is an all-world player. Those guys can get buckets, but there are real question marks about their defense.
I have so much respect for Kevin Durant as a player. I really can't articulate it more. When I watched him in Tokyo last year after exhausting himself coming off the Achilles and the way he played in Tokyo, my admiration for him, if it can go higher, it goes even higher. So it's very difficult for me to admit that and then also say that he can't do something. But I'm watching this game last night. Detroit is the number 28 offensive team in the league.
Yeah.
Jeremy Grant, who was their leading scorer, he's been out a lot, but he's their leading scorer, is out. And they gave up 123 points in Brooklyn. They just don't have good defensive fundamentals. They didn't have good defensive fundamentals in January. They don't have them in March. I don't think they're going to have them in April. And so, Molly, if this was another year, if this was 2015 or 16, back in those years where the Cavs with LeBron didn't even have to stretch before a game till the conference finals, and the East had some, not so good teams, I would feel like, I could see this. But it's not just the Nets defense that's worrisome. It's the quality of the opposition that they're going to have to beat. And so I'm not necessarily on the same page as JJ. I think it's going to depend on the matchup.
Yeah.
But I just can't get behind believing that they can win 3 playoff series with defending in this manner.
See, Wendy, I don't have the Nets coming out of the East. I can potentially see if they can get to maybe the Eastern semis before it's over because of those defensive woes. But I'm not going to sit up here on national TV and say they're not going to win a playoff series. I'm not doing that. I'm not betting against the most lethal, the most skilled duo the game of basketball has ever seen. Let me just say that. The most skilled duo the game of basketball has ever seen. You're telling me you're going to bet against Kyrie and KD going off for 40 or 50? I think their offensive power can make up for the lack of their defensive abilities to a degree. Doesn't get you over the hump. I'm not betting against them to win a playoff series, though. I think that's erroneous. But I will say, to add to your point, such a different team this year. And it's the personnel for Sean Marks that is a question, right? Last year, we had Landry Shamet, we had Jared Allen, we had Joe Harris, who was healthy. Those are defensive guys. Joe Harris, one of the toughest defensive players there is in the league. He may not have the quickest feet laterally, but he has intention to guard you every possession. Jared Allen can erase a lot of mistakes as the backbone of your defense. Landry Shamet, long, guys like that can be athletic. They can help add to the legs that have to actually carry for KD and Kyrie. But when you talk about, just Detroit, 119 to the Hornets, 132 to the Grizz, 123 to Portland. To Portland, and then 113 to the Mavs. So I think what happens here, we end up not shining the light on the person that has to make this happen. And that's Steve Nash to me.
I thought you were going to say Ben Simmons.
Well, it's going to be, look, obviously you want to have Ben Simmons. That's why you traded for him, but obviously he's not available.
Yeah.
But one of the things I'm hearing around the league, Wendy, is that there are a lot of scouts, there are a lot of coaches that don't feel like Steve Nash is great at in-game adjustments. And for me, over the next month and a half, 2 months, I want to see what kind of junk he throws out there. We know your team isn't one of the best defensively, but you still have Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. And you know how normal people like me are going to look at it and say, you got KD and Kyrie. Like, there are no excuses.
Yeah.
I know you don't have Ben Simmons, but still, now it's time to show us where your coaching is, your second year full-time head coaching. You got the opportunity. Now it's time to show us what's in your bag.
He does have a great staff. And
I agree with you.
Steve Clifford is one of the best tactician coaches. Steve Clifford is a coaching advisor to Steve. I just don't know if you can build habits in April. I mean, this. I sound like an old man.
Whose job is that to build habits?
It's the coach's job. I know. I sound like an old man. This is something I would roll my eyes at when I was in my 20s, because I would hear somebody say this and go, okay, just outshoot them. But I've watched the NBA for too long. I've watched these teams who in these situations where you got to get a stop or you got to get 2 stops out of 3 in the end of a playoff game. Because we know there's going to be games where Kyrie does score 47 and Durant does score 36 and they're going to win. I'm talking about when they're playing the Bucks or they're playing the Heat and it's 2-2 and the series is on the line and they can't get stops and they end up losing 136, 132. And then they got to do that again in the next series and then again in the next series. I just don't know if they have enough. Great skill, but I don't know if they got enough.
How does that all fall on Steve Nash, though, when he just got Kyrie back? That was out of his control, so he hasn't had his guys, and now he doesn't have Ben Simmons.
Well, I never used absolutes. I didn't say it all falls on Steve Nash. I just said that I'm paying attention now to in-game adjustments on how you defend, what your schemes are like, and how you choose to defend if you go against a Philadelphia with Joel Embiid and James Harden. I don't worry about when the playoffs get here. players recognize that they can kick it into a different gear. And I know fans may not understand that but you're playing 82 games. It's a lot of games. And we're expecting KD to drop 40 every night. Kyrie's coming back now. I know he has fresh legs. But the level of intensity goes up. I do think that KD and Kyrie and the Nets can match that. But we know it's the game within 4-minute increments, right? The game within the games that coaches have to manage. And how they manage that will ultimately dictate, especially if you're undermanned, especially if you're not that great defensively. That's where coaching adds a huge advantage to the talent of KD and Kyrie.
Before we move on real quick, you hear him most skilled duo of all time? You buying that?
I had to pause when he said that. I
paused too, but I didn't want to interrupt the debate. But I'm like, well, making note of that
when they did the Harden trade, he said this is. How did you say it? You said this is the most fearsome trio
of the game.
And I kind of, at that time, I kind of went, I don't know about that, Jay. And then I watched him play, and I was like, it's pretty fearsome. So when he says that, I wish I could, Chris Russo this and pound the table and say, name them, but I'm not ready to fight.
Tell me a more skilled duo. I mean, if you want to give me the Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen argument, but Scottie still wasn't as lethal.
There's
as
almost
KD
been nobody I've
Kyrie.
ever seen as skilled as Kyrie Irving. So you start with that.
Who's the most skilled player in the game today? Would you say Kyrie?
With the ball.
All right. Who's the second most skilled player in the game today?
Kevin Durant's the best shooter I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it's
dribbler,
like I said,
passer.
Molly, I wish I had a bazooka to go right back at him. I don't have it, so I guess he may have a point. But I reserve the right.
If you marinate on it a little later,
if you want to sit
on it and just revisit it, you just want to pause. I like to think about things
in the middle of the NFL segment to come bursting on set.
Absolutely.
Stephen A., go ahead, tweet. I know you're on vacation. I'll wait, though. I'll wait for him, too.
I don't know where he would be on this one. We'll see.
Okay.
We'll see. We'll find out. All right, we'll keep it going, guys. The LA Clippers, we saw what Paul George still has, scoring 34. In a return from absence, 3 months he's been gone. A comeback versus the Utah Jazz. He hit 5 of 7 shots in the third when he erupted for 20 of his points to help the Clippers erase a 25-point deficit with 8:07 remaining in that frame. He made 6 of 9 three-pointers for the game. Here's PG with our Malika Andrews.
You guys have been the comeback kings with and without you on the floor this season. Now that you're back, now that you're healthy, and you're looking at the playoff picture, how do you see this season shaking out for you all?
We just got to get one of these spots. Finish this year off. Like I said, I challenge the guys to start shaping into a playoff team. We got to do that now, opposed to getting to the play-in game, and now we're trying to pull it together and be a playoff team. It starts now. We got to start building and getting some chemistry going, some consistency going. And then from there, we can do, just about anything. We've had a great playoff run last year. I think we're a better team this year. And so, anything can happen. We just got to lock in one of these spots.
First of all, great to see PG back. Do you think that he and the Clippers could give the Suns or Grizzlies a series?
Hell no. No, I don't. I think Phoenix and Memphis are exponentially, and obviously I think Golden State could be in that conversation depending upon the health of Steph and Draymond in the back and how Clay coming off missing 2 years of playing a game of basketball. I still think they're a year away from being back to where they were. But I think Phoenix and Memphis are by far the 2 best teams in the Western Conference. And I love Paul George. Now, if you're telling me Paul George and Kawhi Leonard were coming back, I might have to take a second and pause, Molly. You know what I mean, Wendy?
Of course.
Those 2 players combined with Terrence Mann, Reggie Jackson, Zubac, the way they defend, Ty Lue as a coach. But I don't see Paul George being enough to get them over the hump with the way. Have you seen Memphis defend? I know we talk a lot about what Memphis' record is without Ja, which is 18-2. But with Ja Morant healthy, they are dogs. Have you seen the basketball gods may have gifted Chris Paul, the point guard, the best gift of all time. Even better odds than what they were last year with win a championship this year. So I watch both those teams. They are by far the best teams in Western Conference. Clippers are good. They're fine. I can see them maybe get to the Western Conference semis. But I don't see them going above that.
First off, extremely impressive performance from Paul George to not play for 40 games.
Yeah.
Come back and score 34. And by the way, just rip open a wound on the Jazz last night. The Jazz
did it last year, right? Game 6.
25. The Jazz were up 25 in this game. Paul George he led the Clippers back. So the Clippers have not been playing well. They actually just came off their worst 10-game stretch of the season. Getting Paul back was vital for them. They're not playing their best basketball right now. I know that the playoffs aren't today, but I can't look at the way they're playing and say, oh yeah, I see a team that shows indications that they're taking off. Now, they win their next 6 games, and Ja can't come back. These are pieces of information I don't have. Well, then I might have a different opinion on this, but I just don't see. And, if it's the 8th seed, forget about Phoenix. The Phoenix is playing some of the most technically perfect basketball I've ever seen. What Chris Paul is doing, he's not going to win the MVP, but I'm really considering giving him an honorary spot on my ballot just because I've never seen a guy operate a team and lead a team. Almost never seen a guy like that this year. So I don't think anybody's taken. I don't think this team's taken flight. Even if Kawhi came back and played, just because he has no rhythm.
Played.
But that's why Kawhi wouldn't come back, because he knows that they can't beat him.
I wonder when Kawhi is going to come back.
Well, they won't. They still won't rule him out. If they can end up winning that play-in game, which right now would be against Minnesota, I don't love.
Game. That's a tough game.
And they get the 7 seed, and Ja is not playing. I guess I give them a chance to take a couple of games, but how can I say that?
Their record without Ja so impressive. At 18-2, it's unreal. By the way, Donovan Mitchell real frustrated yesterday. You could see that too. I know we showed the Paul George sound, but him just frustrated with that squad altogether.
I also want to say, I find it when players start saying 6 games left in the regular season, we have to find our rhythm. It's time for us to kick it into playoff gear. I'm like, man, it's past the time.
Yeah. Habits.
It's past the time. Exactly. Your habits translate to the playoffs, and your habits haven't been that great, and you're trying to, insert yourself back into the lineup. And I get what offensive boost that can make, but I don't think that's nowhere close enough to get over the hump of a fully healthy Memphis and Phoenix team. We should not even be discussing that. I think it's a disservice to how good Memphis and Phoenix actually are.
They're steaming mad. Des Bain wants to have something to say.
Up against it. We'll be back. Most skilled duo. Think about it. Still to come on First Take. Did you hear Russell Westbrook after the game? The Lakers now have the same record as the Spurs, who hold the conference tiebreaker and could bump LA out of the play-in. It's the first time since October that the Lakers are out of playoff contention. Dominique Foxworth back with us, and Wendy still here. And let me just say this again in case anyone's just joining us. Brad Turner, a pro's pro. I feel like he handled that absolutely perfectly. He was firm. He's honest. No one cares about my opinion. They care about you. You're the pro. We want to know from you. Wendy, tell me this. Where do the Lakers go from here?
Well, short term, it's probably going to get worse before it gets better, Molly, because they are probably going to play tomorrow night without LeBron James and Anthony Davis in Utah, in a game Utah has got to have, because they have now almost fallen back to 6th in the Western Conference. So I don't love their chances tomorrow. Then maybe LeBron comes back this weekend. Maybe AD comes back this weekend. But the Spurs' schedule is easier between now and then. So I think that the Lakers could functionally be 2 or 3 games back by the time those guys get back. So even if they start playing better, AD comes back, hits the ground running. When he came back earlier this season from the knee injury, he played great immediately. Let's just say he does that. Let's just say he does the hope. But they may be so far back with a tough schedule, it may not matter. So really, if you're a Laker fan and you want to see them advance, you need to start rooting for the Portland Trailblazers, because they play the Spurs twice this week. And then into the offseason, the longer range, I would love to tell you that I had a blueprint ready for what the Lakers need to do. The only thing I can say is they should call all 29 other teams and say, what will you give me for Russell Westbrook as an expiring contract? We are willing to take back money. You're not trading for him as a player. You're trading for him as an expiring contract, $47 million. And if you can find a taker, you take anything that you can get. And then you try to assess what you have. That, to me, is their first order of business. I don't know if they're going to be able to do it.
Real quick, Nick, before we get you in here, this just came to mind from our earlier conversation. What would be worse, if the Lakers miss the play-in or the Nets don't even win a series? When we're talking these super teams, superstars that we were all clamoring to see in this year's finals.
I'm guessing that.
I was asking you.
Yeah, I thought you were asking Wendy. I'm
asking Wendy.
You're asking me?
Yes, I thought you were giving me a dramatic pause or something.
I thought you were asking Dominique. I didn't like the. It's not the same Nets team that you're talking about from the start of the season. This is a team that does not have James Harden and doesn't have his replacement. So I will say the Lakers is worse because the fall is greater, and they don't have, frankly, as much to blame.
Got it. I enjoyed the dramatic pause, though. I was really, waiting for it.
I was like, what's he going to say to this?
It's all good. Nick, where do the Lakers go from here?
I mean, the short term, it's nowhere, obviously. Like, I think this season is over and it's looking into next season. And I think what Wendy pointed out is the scary part is who wants to take on Russell for $47 million. And I assume there are teams that are planning to tank. And having Russell on your roster might put some butts in the seats while you are losing because his value as a player, not that it was all that high before, it's gone down to a point where I can't imagine a team wanting to bring him in order to make a run. It's a sad place to be in for such a great, great player. But I do think that we have to appreciate that they won a title. And there are teams that have never won titles. And as much as we have these high expectations of the Lakers and high expectations of LeBron James, they won a title. And I'm looking at all these teams like just across, or not across town, in the same building. The Clippers made a bunch of other trades a few seasons ago and moves to get in a title contention window. They haven't won a title. I'm sure they would take the bleak future that the Lakers have going forward with AD on the roster, with LeBron on the roster, as long as they got a title out of it. The bubble title, I get it, but it's a title nonetheless.
Is one title enough when we're talking those three, those big things? We're talking about the Lakers?
Absolutely. I mean, I never
I don't know if that's what LA signed up for.
I mean, I won one when I was in Pop Warner, and I never won one in anything higher level than that. So hell yeah, I don't care. LA, they have to accept that we're in a new phase of the NBA. We're not in a period where they can go and attract all the big stars and Cat be damned. We're in a different period. They're gonna have to fend for these superstars like everyone else. And if you have to mortgage a couple years of your future in order to have one championship, I mean, I think it's a good deal. Look around the league. I mean, the Suns would do it. I'm sure the Nuggets would do it.
You think one's enough? Mission's accomplished with AD and LeBron and Brody.
I have developed a saying in 20 years covering the NBA that when you win a championship, it means never having to say you're sorry because winning is so hard. So when you look at Rob Pelinka's performance, you can say, boy, he botched this roster, but he still put together a championship team. You can say, boy, it's really unfortunate AD keeps getting hurt. He won a championship. I don't know how much that gets you in terms in LA, especially when you come into a season and declare that you think you're going to do this.
No, it's fair.
But I will never take away from that accomplishment. It is definitely spectacular. I just don't know. None of them would say that if LeBron, when he came there, the day he came to LA and signed, if you'd have told him he'd have won one title in 4 years, he'd have been, oh my, that's great. I would be so happy to win one title in 4 years. If you'd have told him 10 minutes after he won in there, I don't know where, different Lakers fans are going to have different.
I hear you. I just felt like the standard's different because of those names, the Lakers. But you know who would appreciate a title? Like a pathetic Knicks fan like Stephen A. And
Exactly.
I have another tweet for Stephen A. I hope he just heard that. And we asked you earlier, KD and Kyrie, are they the most skilled duo of all time? So Jay Williams said yes, they were. That was his hot take. And Wendy, I said I'd give you a little time to marinate on it. Well, Stephen A's responded, Jay Will may have a point. KD and Kyrie, if we're just talking offense, last check though, defense matters. So Jordan and Pippen is still it for me. And yes, I'm still watching First Take. Hopefully from an elliptical, getting your cardio in or something. Wendy, thoughts on that?
Well, we get into the argument about what the word skill means. I sound like a lawyer. Yes.
You sound like someone else, but keep going.
Defense is certainly a skill, but that's not what Jay was saying. He was talking about, the techniques of basketball, which are shooting, dribbling, passing.
Yeah.
You take in defense, Kyrie and Durant, you start talking, if you add defense to it, you're going to push them down the list. As you talk about defensive skill, I mean, LeBron and Dwayne Wade were incredibly skilled defensively. I mean, you start talking about those guys. So, I mean, I don't think that was the spirit of what Jay was talking about. I think what Jay was saying is when you are so great on offense, when you say my skill is my defense, my offense is my defense, which essentially is what the Nets are going about this year, that's his point. But let me just say something. Knowing Scottie Pippen personally, having spent a lot of time talking about Scottie and what he worked on defense and the way Scottie feels about current players, If I told Scottie Pippen the defense wasn't a skill, he would have me up against that wall right there. I mean,
We're saying
am
KD and Kyrie most skilled offense. That's what
Yes.
Stephen A. is saying. That's what you're co-signing on.
I
But
am
if we're talking about
co-signing with
most
Stephen A.
skilled, period, it includes defense as well, right, Nick?
that you just summarized what I said.
I would absolutely include defense in this conversation. And I know it's sacrilege, but I would still go with KD and Kyrie. I would say that, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but Jordan and KD, as far as skilled, like a draw at best, if not giving it to KD for his size and his ability to do what he does on offense and defense. So like if you're willing to give me a draw there, which I might honestly go with KD over Jordan, that's skilled, not his greatest, but if you're willing to give me a draw there, and then you compare the defensive deficiencies of Kyrie with the relative offensive deficiencies of Pippen, I think Kyrie's offense is better and more skilled is the question. He can do more things offensively as far as finishing at the rim, handling the ball, shooting, passing, like all of that stuff. He can do a lot more there, I think, than Pippen can do on defense. Although he's one of the best defenders of all time, Kyrie's probably the best ball handler of all time. Not one of, like the best ball handler.
See what he has to say about this conversation if he wants to weigh
Jordan
in, too.
could shoot the way Durant shoots, he'd averaged 45.
I don't know what side of the argument that puts you on, but I agree, Wendy. You're right.
That means Durant's incredible, is what I mean.
Right.
Wendy, thank you so much. 2 days in a row in studio. Who's better than me? This is great. I have friends.
So
Still to come here on First Take. You can't go anywhere, though, Nick. It seems Rodgers may finally be getting his wish. The Packers have no choice but to draft for a wide receiver. But who's it going to be? Mel Kiper Jr., Mike Tannenbaum tell us next. And we all assume that it was time for Trey in San Francisco, but some ESPN in the app. We start with the top teams in the East. The Heat take on the sizzling Celtics. That's at 7:30 Eastern. Then it's the West leading Suns and the Warriors. Our coverage beginning with NBA Countdown at 7 Eastern. To the NFL we go now. When the offseason began, a lot of people were wondering if a big star was going to leave Green Bay. One did, but not the one who was expected, as Aaron Rodgers signed an extension to stay with the team while his top target, Davante Adams, was shipped to Las Vegas for some picks. Now the Packers and that bad man are looking for a new connection. Certainly, if you look at our roster right now, we definitely need to get some speed in that room. Matt LaFleur said Tuesday at the NFL owners meetings in Palm Beach, Florida, we need a legit guy that can take off the top of the coverage. We've lost a guy that was pretty good at doing just that. Speaking of pretty good, we welcome in Mel Kiper Jr., Rob Ninkovich, and Mike Tannenbaum back here with us. Gentlemen, thank you for rejoining. And Mel, I'm going to start with you, sir. The Packers have a big need at receiver. Who should they target in the draft?
A lot of draft capital, Molly, and an opportunity to maybe stay at 22 and look at Jameis.
Oh, it looks like we
move
lost
up to
Mel.
get a Garrett Wilson from Ohio State.
Mel, you got me? All right, we're dealing with some technical hits. We'll try to get Mel back. Meanwhile, Mike, you jump in on this one. Where do you think they should go from here for help at the wide receiver position?
Yeah, Jamison Williams from Alabama. Molly, he is explosive. I was at the Georgia-Alabama SEC championship game. He was the best player on the field. He had 7 catches, over 180 yards, and he's a guy that tore his ACL, may not be ready until halfway through the season. But when you think about a player that could come in and not replace Davante Adams, but give him some of that explosion, especially this year, where it's so hugely consequential, Jamison Williams from Alabama could do that.
Rob, I want to bring you in here, and it definitely seems like the easier path to the Super Bowl is in the NFC, where the AFC is just stacked at this point, especially with Russell Wilson going to Denver. We know how loaded the AFC West is, now best in the division. Where does Green Bay stack up amongst the NFC's elite now that he lost Davante Adams, arguably the best receiver?
Well, it's tough to put them on a list right now as of today because there's still a lot more offseason to go and there's going to be some transition here on the team. These rosters are not set before they go into offseason workouts even. So, you know, when I look at just the NFC in general, the Packers really haven't gone up at all. Like, they haven't done anything. Better yet, they've gone down, in my view. So, you know, you lose your big-time receiver. You don't really have a pass rusher. You talk about their defense. That's the one need that they do have. They need a pass rusher to get to the quarterback. So I have them 5th on my list right now, as of right now. So number 1 being the Rams. Obviously, they're Super Bowl champions. Number 2, good old Tom Brady. He's back. So I'm going with Tampa at 2. And then for 3, this one was tough. 3, 4, I was like, man, who am I going to go with? I really think the Cardinals this year are going to be better than they were last year. So I'm going with the Cardinals. And then there's a team that I think that could be really, really sneaky, and that's the 49ers. With having Jimmy G back, knowing that he's going to be your quarterback, with the young quarterback behind him, still probably doing that platooning of where they're coming on and off the field. But I think the 49ers are going to be a better team this year as well. So that puts the Packers to me at 5.
Wow. All right. Five does seem a little bit low, but Davante Adams was a huge loss. Mel, you got me now. Good to see you, sir. In case you missed any of what we were just saying, I essentially had asked Rob there, where do the Packers now stand amongst the NFC's elite? He had them 5th. But Mel, what I wanted to ask you is obviously a huge hole at receiver now, losing Davante Adams to the Raiders. Where do they go from here? And Mike T had said Jameson Williams.
Yeah, Jameson Williams, do you stay at 22 and wait it out with New England picking 1 slot ahead, or do you try to move up and get a Garrett Wilson from Ohio State or a Drake London from USC? Back in 2011, Atlanta went from 27 to 6 to get Julio Jones. At 28, they could maybe jump up with that pick and keep 22, or keep them both and look at an offensive lineman like Tyler Smith from Tulsa. Rob was talking about pass rush. There's some underrated pass rushers in this draft as well. Deep wide receiver group. They've had 4 really good second-round picks and a good third-round pick in their history. I mean, Davante Adams isn't the only great second-round pick they had. Greg Jennings went in the 2nd. Jordy Nelson went in the 2nd. James Jones went in the 3rd. You have guys in that round area like Christian Watson, North Dakota State, Calvin Austin III out of Memphis, Sky Moore out of Western Michigan, Isaiah Weston out of Northern Iowa, Alec Pierce out of Cincinnati. They're really going to be good 2nd and 3rd round receivers. So the depth at wide receiver, Molly, really helps Green Bay in this draft.
Absolutely. Mike, what do you think about what Rob said of the Packers being 5th now in the NFC potentially?
Yeah, I would actually have Dallas in front of Green Bay right now because despite losing Randy Gregory, they were able to bring back Dorrance Armstrong. They were able to sign Dante Fowler, who has a history with Dan Quinn. And when you look offensively, while they did lose Amari Cooper and Cedric Wilson, they were able to keep Michael Gallup paired with CeeDee Lamb. As Mel just alluded to, there's plenty of wide receivers in this year's draft. So I think when it's all said and done, I don't think we're giving Dallas enough credit. And I think because of the strength of Dak Prescott, I would put them in the top 4 in the NFC.
Oh, I wish we had Stephen A. here today, just so he could hear that. The Cowboys ahead of that bad man who lost to Jimmy G. It is certainly my day, gentlemen. We will leave it there. When we come back here on First Take, Mel, thank you so much for being with us. I know you got plenty more to get to with draft right around the corner. All right, still to come. They knocked off Stephen A.'s favorite team in the postseason just a year ago. Should the Niners run it back with Jimmy G, or is it time for Trey? And he's back. How can you not be excited? Tom Brady back with the Bucs. I am. Wait till you hear what Coach has to say. Is he the quarterback that's going to get the Lombardi in the NFC? We get into it. After losing the NFC Championship game, most people thought that was the last we would see of Jimmy G in that Niner red. Even the quarterback himself admitted he was most likely gone. We've seen many quarterback dominoes fall so far this season, but Jimmy G still with the team with Trey Lance waiting in the wings. Kyle Shanahan says the Niners are still in no rush to trade Garoppolo.
We brought Trey here to be that eventually, and I think that'll be sooner than later, but when Jimmy gets his surgery and we can't upgrade our team by getting some good picks until surgery, until people feel good about that, I'm all right with that. I mean, we're not just getting rid of them to get rid of them.
All right, Nick back with us and Mike T as well. Dominique, what do you think? Does Jimmy G or Trey Lance give San Francisco the best chance to win?
I think it has to be Trey Lance, and there's a lot of question marks about how good Trey Lance can be. But John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan traded away more than 3 first-round picks to get Trey Lance. So that suggests to me that they didn't think Jimmy G was the answer. And no matter what they thought, we watched last year. Like, we've watched Jimmy G play, and we all know the feeling that we had in the closing minutes of close games is that Jimmy G was not the answer. He is not the type of quarterback that is going to take them over the edge to being a guaranteed championship contender. And I do think that he's good enough to be carried. Like, he's not going to destroy that team. He proved that by getting them to a Super Bowl several years ago. Like, he's not going to crush that team, but it seemed like in those big moments when you need someone to make a big play, he was unable to do it. And Trey Lance is not going to get better by sitting on the bench. So it might be a rougher regular season this year, and it may be a rough season altogether. But I think putting Trey Lance on the field and letting him improve gives them the best chance to win the championship, if not this year, then the next.
Yeah, I totally disagree with Nick. Jimmy G is 31-14 as a starter. They average 28 points a game when he's playing quarterback. And over the last couple of years, took him to the Super Bowl, almost beat Kansas City. And in the championship game, if Jarsky Tart catches that punt from Matt Stafford, they're back in another Super Bowl. So I don't think he's perfect by any stretch. And I really like Trey Lance a lot, but he's a massive question mark. You have a team that's ready to win right now, not in a year, not in 2 years, right now. And Jimmy G is a more established veteran quarterback. And while we think Trey Lance may be really good one day, for this season, I'm hard-pressed to understand why the 49ers would ever move on from Jimmy G. I would keep him. I would start him. I would probably give Trey Lance some reps here and there. But no question, in 2022, Jimmy G is the best quarterback for the 49ers.
You start him because that's how you get better. You get better by playing. You don't get better by sitting on the bench. And by running, platooning two quarterbacks, I think that takes away from both of them. Like, that's practice time that Jimmy G is not getting if he's your starter, and Trey Lance is not getting the full attention that he needs if he's a starter. So I don't think that platooning them is the smart move. Maybe putting in some sort of red zone package for Trey Lance or a third or fourth down package for Trey Lance is one thing. But I would say, first of all, QB wins, like, come on. We're past that as a stat. Like, QB wins is not a stat that anyone that cares about football respects. And second of all, the Super Bowl that they got him to, that the 49ers took Jimmy Garoppolo to, he threw an interception with his eyes closed just before halftime. Like, let's not forget that happened. And last year, yes, if Jaworski Tart catches that interception, they're back in the Super Bowl. But let's also remember he threw for less than 200 yards in 2 playoff games, less than 200 yards and 2 interceptions in 2 playoff games. The championship game, he had over 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. One of those touchdowns was a screen pass that he threw to Deebo Samuel that he took for a 44-yard touchdown. So we can like cherry pick particular numbers and QB stats and pretend like Jimmy G is the answer. But Jimmy G seems to me, last year when we were all watching, I remember sitting there knowing that they needed something from Jimmy G, watching that Cowboys game that, yes, they won, but they needed Jimmy G to make plays, and he missed wide open receivers on back-to-back occasions in the fourth quarter. They needed him to make plays in San Francisco, and he threw an interception on a late out route against, or not in San Francisco, in Green Bay, at Green Bay. Like, these are things that happened not that long ago. And you can point to Jimmy G having success, but I would say that Jimmy G was a passenger. He wasn't steering that. And when they need something from him, he hasn't done it. I'm not here to guarantee that Trey Lance can do it, but there's a question. Maybe Trey Lance can do it. We already know the answer is that Jimmy G might close his eyes and throw an interception in the biggest game of his life. He might throw a red zone pick against the Green Bay Packers. He might also miss wide open receivers. Like, we can point to the numbers here and there, but we can also point to the actual things that happened.
Mike T, is it fair to call Jimmy G a passenger? Because you could also argue he didn't cost them Super Bowls, right?
Yeah, he's not a passenger. He's more of like a car that can self-drive at times. And context is everything here, which is I understand that the quarterback stat of wins is not a one-size-fits-all approach. But in this situation, Jimmy G with Kyle Shanahan, sometimes the best thing you can do offensively is run the ball or punt, not turn the ball over. And the question is Trey Lance or Jimmy G this year. It's not Jimmy G versus the world, because I'm not saying he's a world beater, but I'm saying in this situation, it's worked for a long time. And in some of those games, Neek, that, for example, the Green Bay playoff game, Aaron Rodgers was struggling in the same conditions that Jimmy G was. And I think he has a really good feel for this offense. He understands where, again, some long handoffs to Deebo Samuel. I know that inflates his statistics, but it's still a positive play for the offense. And the whole notion of having a small package for Trey Lance, I'll say this. On some of the great Jet teams we've had that went to championship games, there were small packages for guys like Brad Smith. And working with Rex Ryan, who had a defensive background, he would say that really hurt preparation from a standpoint that even though it may be a 15-play package, it takes away from your preparation. So I think a small package for Trey Lance only enhances the overall offense of the 49ers.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Molly.
No, go ahead. I was just going to ask you, because you weren't in the conversation earlier, where you have the Niners in the NFC. Because when we asked Rob, he had them third, he had the Packers fifth, and then Mike even had the Cowboys ahead of the Packers as well.
Yeah, I heard the Cowboys. That surprised me considering what's happening to them this offseason. But I mean, I think the Niners are at the top of a very weak conference. I could see the Niners winning if they move on from Jimmy G. So I think third is a good place for them. But I would say to the idea of having a a Trey Lance Packers, like I agree with that. I just don't agree with the idea that you can platoon them in and give them both practice time. Like you need to install that package in camp and then not practice again because it forces defenses to prepare for it. But if you have to practice it every week, that is also taking away from your preparation time for your quarterback. And if you can consider Jimmy G anything other than a passenger, I don't know. Like the win stat, it's a beautiful stat. It's fun. But let's think about who was playing quarterback for them when Jimmy G was not in there. They were people who are not NFL starters. So it's not like you're dropping him into a situation that he's being compared to a legitimate starter. These were like Nick Mullins, like guys like that. No disrespect to them, but that's not the type of quarterback you want to win a championship with. So I think that we know Jimmy G's ceiling, and Jimmy G's ceiling is throwing interceptions in the red zone, throwing interceptions in the Super Bowl, and not elevating his team. You need a quarterback in the modern NFL, as we've seen. You look at the quarterbacks who have won and competed. It's possible to win without one of those quarterbacks, but you need a guy that's going to make a play, a big play at a moment when it's not expected. We've yet to see Jimmy G do that. We don't know if Trey Lance can or can't, but at least there's some hope that he could.
Yeah, and self-driving cars don't always make.
Yeah, I don't trust them. You need to look up the stats on them things.
Accelerate the way you're looking for. It's kind of a steady pace. Okay. All right, still to come here on First Take. It's the return that had every